So I was very fortunate to be able to attend this wonderful event that IBM organized at the Eames Ranch last month, and it was absolutely fantastic. And 50 or so of your clients, and really got a taste for how they're grappling with the topic of this session right now, which is how you go from this kind of superficial, oh, we all get that design is important, to actually making it work in a large organization. And I'd just love to have each of you maybe kind of quickly weigh in on your top insights on that. What mistakes do you see that especially big companies make?
Oh, everything you can imagine. We're at a point in the maturity of design in the enterprise where we need to start figuring out how to scale.
Yeah.
That's been a big issue for us at IBM. We need to figure out how to have meaningful conversations with our business leaders. We need to figure out how to measure the value of design in a real serious way, so that those conversations have substance. And we're at, I think, a pivotal point where if we can't figure that out, if we can't figure out how to have those conversations, we could easily be yesterday's news in the years to come. And I think it's a real point where we need to do some real soul searching in that way.
Nathan, how about you? Tell us a little bit about Seed Vault and what you're doing also.
Well, I've got a whole bunch of things going on. I have a startup that's based here in Singapore, actually, although I'm not. And then I've been an educator for 20 years now. And I started something called the Design Mba Program about 12 years ago and ran it for 10 years ago. And it was really an investigation into part of my answer to your question, which is we need entirely new tools. Yeah. We can talk about measuring the value of design, and I think that that's a problematic frame to begin with, because we just won't ever be able to measure all of design's impact. And so I think business people need to have some comfort with the ambiguity of there's going to be important things that we don't see in the spreadsheet. But on the other side, we need to reinvent all of the business tools, because they don't make allowance. There's no room for the kind of value that design brings. We teach in the program that there's 5 kinds of value, and functional and financial are 2 of them. They're the easiest to measure, the easiest to see. But the other 3, emotional, identity, and meaningful, end up being way more important, way more stable, and in fact, way more valuable. But they're essentially invisible to business tools. So you can't get to that extreme value creation that all entrepreneurs and all leaders and investors want if you're going to use tools that absolutely ignore and don't see that value.
Yeah, and I think you're onto something really important there, Nathan, that we as designers can't fall into the trap of conducting these conversations on somebody else's terms.
Yeah.
And I think you've done a great job in the CCA program of redefining what those terms are.
Well, we do it sort of in academia, and you're doing it in the corporate world with all these partners who have essentially been trained, I won't exactly say the wrong way, but in a way that's no longer adequate to take us where we need to go.
Yeah.
For people that may not know, IBM has really embraced design as kind of core to its own strategy. It now employs about 1,700 formally trained designers.
Let me update your number. We're over 2,000
Is that right?
formally trained designers at IBM now.
So that's quite amazing. That makes, easily, maybe Samsung is in competition as well, but as far as I know, that makes IBM the largest employer of formally trained designers anywhere
in the world.
But it was interesting to me at the Eames Ranch, talking to some of your clients. I really did get a sense of how people were there because you had obviously been in touch with their CEOs, and the CEOs had gotten the message that design was important. But what I heard from a number of people was, now what do we do? The boss says do it, and so we've got this top-down directive. But everybody still has their same jobs, and everybody's still turfy about their professional responsibilities. And what are we going to do differently? So what do you tell people when they get to that stage?
Well, it's a condition that we see. Yeah. We see that CEO advocating and buying in. We see the teams on the ground really ready to go, and it's that frozen middle that we really need to work. And we certainly had that condition at IBM. We launched our program 6 years ago, and that is, we've got great leadership support. Ginny Rometty, our
Yeah.
CEO, is just our chief advocate and believer and investor. And certainly with 2,000 designers on the ground now, we've got the ability to really do the job at the ground level. But how do we penetrate the organization? And I think it's partly getting designers into key leadership roles, and we've done a lot of work to really elevate design leaders within the company into senior and executive level roles, where they're sitting at the table not only at the sort of C level, but in each of our businesses. That's when we talk about scale. At a complex company like IBM, we've got to really break it down into what are, how is the company organized, and how can we penetrate that organization in a really strategic way.
And you would agree with this idea that it's not wise to isolate design expertise in a single vertical?
Well, in our organization, that's the approach.
You have a design, yeah. That's how
we've got a decentralized organization. So we've got a small center of competency that manages our design system, our design language, and our design thinking practice. But by and large, those 2,000 designers are out in the business, reporting into the leadership of our individual business units and divisions, and so that's important for us. There's a pro to that. We can really penetrate all corners of the company with that model, but we also lose touch with those designers, right? When they're spread out to that degree. So pros and cons to that model, but overall it's an approach that's really worked for us.
Huh. Nathan, what does the research say on this? And do different strategies work for different types of companies in different industries? And
absolutely.
Does size make a difference in terms of how to incorporate design?
Yeah, for a book that I did with Cheskin about 10 years ago now, more like 14 years ago, called Making Meaning, Cheskin did a bunch of innovation research with different companies, and what they found was essentially there were 5 different innovation cultures. The dynamic innovators, the ones that you sort of talk about as the greatest users of design. These are companies where the culture is such that there's lots of interconnections between different divisions and different functions, and it's supported by the CEOs and the leadership, et cetera. That's probably the best kind of situation where design impacts innovation and creates value, but it's only one of 5. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the innovation outsourcers, which is these are companies and organizations with cultures that they're just not going to be able to manage that. They're far away from that. So they innovate by purchasing other companies or purchasing products, and it works for them. And there's various cultures in between. I think the important thing for any designer, but any business person, is to identify the culture that they're in, because that's going to define what's going to work and not work for their time there. Over time, you of course can shift culture, but you all can, we all in this room know how difficult that is. That doesn't happen overnight. It's a possibility. So the first thing is just to identify, how is innovation and how is design spread through the organization, and therefore, what can I expect to work and not work, and who are my real partners?
Huh. So we're going to talk in one of the breakout sessions in a little more detail later today about this question of acquiring an outside design capability, rather than growing it organically, trying to just go out and buy it off the shelf. Is it possible to generalize, do you think, as to whether that's a successful strategy or not? Because obviously a lot of big professional services firms right now are doing that.
I don't, in general, it works for some, it doesn't work for most, it seems like.
Is that right? How come it doesn't work? What goes wrong?
I think it's a mismatch of the cultures. And when I sold my company back in '99 for the first time, we thought we were so careful of finding a partner, finding an acquirer that had the same culture. It's so wrong. But we
really,
but we tried, right? Like we thought that, and our mistake was we were looking and listening to and talking to the leadership of the company, and their culture, as they saw it within their company, was very much like the company that we were and trying to be. And it turns out they just had a big mismatch between the leadership and what was really going on at the sort of middle layers. Yeah. So we connected here, and then when we integrated here, it did not work.
Yeah, culture change by acquisition is a flawed strategy, I think. But there are certainly instances where acquiring that capacity and that capability can be a really effective strategy. We've done it to some degree in our consulting practice, and we've had decent success with it. But the objective in that case was not to change the culture of IBM through that tactic. It was, to increase our capacity in a certain domain or a certain region.
Yeah. We have really made an effort at Brainstorm Design to include in these conversations disruptive startups, and I think my own impression is that for them, figuring out design, once they get it, it's a little easier when you're a young, kind of nimble company and just getting started. But I know a lot of the clients that I met with at this event were big Fortune 500 companies with many, many years of history. They're banks, they're mining companies, they're insurance companies, and they just were a little bit overwhelmed. Yeah. Is it hard for the larger you get? Does it make it harder to spread design through the organization?
Yes, the larger you get, the older you are, the more embedded your historic culture is. Absolutely, those are barriers to that internal disruption. IBM is this amazing company that's been around for more than 100 years and has found ways to reinvent itself. Every other decade, basically. I mean, you can put the pin on any point in that timeline, and IBM has been a different company. And that's in this era of reinvention, design is what's driving it, and designers.
I liked it when you used the circle because, and the fact that you're retelling the story about being at the Eames Ranch, because IBM was here back then too, right? And the Eames were there as some of the primary design strategists. So it really is full circle for us.
Yeah.
Nathan, I wonder if you maybe could talk a little bit about cultural differences and success in embracing design as part of strategy. You do business this part of the world and as well. Do people think about design differently in Asia?
Well, I have to say that's not really my expertise about regional cultural differences. I reframe that question differently. I think business people and people who are brought up, especially with an MBA degree, are their own culture, and that culture is unlike many of the other cultures in their own organization, whether it's the designers or the engineers or the people in customer service. And that culture is, there's no easy way to say it. It's very problematic because traditional business culture and business in general has sort of clearly been toxic for the planet. We just had Alice and Tony up here giving us vivid examples of that. So the cultural differences I think that really are the hardest to bridge is the culture of business versus the culture of engineering, the culture of design, the culture of other functions. Because designers and business people think very differently, they value different things, and they get rewarded for different kinds of things. And that, I think, is at the heart of the frisson between these two cultures.
So you started this design MBA program, which some people might think is a bit of an oxymoron, that these are two different types of people. I mean, Gene does this wonderful presentation of the MBA temperament versus the designer temperament. And it's a bit of a ideal type, but it's not that far wrong from what I've experienced and seen.
Well, at the heart of it, we're all people, so we all have both similar values and a diversity of values. But what I find is that business education is such that it attracts certain kinds of people gravitate to it, and it really repels other kinds of people. And there's a lot of designers that get repelled by business culture and business tools. But that doesn't mean that everyone that's attracted to it is thinking the same thing and valuing the same thing. So we get, it's funny, in the program that I started, we would get commodities traders and currency traders and economists and people we didn't necessarily expect, right? And the difference is that they care about these other things. They care about values and ethics. They care about sustainability and systems thinking. They care about creative and critical thinking. And those aren't necessarily things that are de rigueur in business education curricula, right? Yeah. So I think that the potential is there, but we have to rethink MBA education completely. We need to teach new things and teach in an integrated way, and then teach new tools, and by the way, we have to invent all these new tools because we don't have them yet.
And what's your impression of how widespread that recognition is in higher education? I mean, are there enough MBA programs that now include design programs or design programs that include something to get designers to think more like business people? What's your
The
impression?
answer is no.
No?
And where they exist, it's not in an integrated way. So, you know, it's not uncommon for me to hear from students in other MBA programs that even have these design classes. I won't name names, but you know, they go back to their traditional classes and they get told, forget all that bullshit you heard over there, none of it's real. And it's the same problem with like how business programs integrate things like ethics, right? Or, you know, so we need an ethics class. No, if you need an ethics class, you need ethics in every class. Having it in a class where it can be sort of tested out of and put to bed, et cetera, is the problem with business, right? Same thing with sustainability. It's a large university that I got to teach at nearby in San Francisco, and they have a sustainable supply chain class, a sustainable operations class, as an elective, which begs the question, what the hell are they teaching in the regular required? And the answer is unsustainable supply chain, right?
Yeah.
So it's really hard to shift curriculum at these institutions, and it's moving way too slowly. And it may be, you know, we're going to lose a minimum of 50% of the white-collar jobs in the world in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And I don't see any curriculum, I don't see governments, and I don't see corporations preparing for that. That's the disruption that's coming. It's not like, oh, designers have a new tool and we're going to put it in, you know, design research. That's not the disruption that's going to happen, but it's actually part of the solution to how we deal with that disruption.
I want to take questions from the floor if there are any, but Doug, let me just ask you quickly while people maybe think, when you go in, suppose a CEO comes to Brainstorm Design and goes, wow, okay, I get this now, really important. So I got a big company, we're gonna get with the program on design, and they come to you for help. How does that work? Do you have a standard roadmap that you give them and a time frame for how long it takes and how they do it?
Yeah, I mean, we've got the playbook that we have run for our own design-driven transformation is the playbook that we use with our clients. And it involves a balance of formally trained designers, the right ratio for your company, a strong practice of design thinking for the rest of your company, designers and non-designers, and really getting your executives, not just C-suite, but executives across the lines of business, really able to advocate for and lead design-driven organizations. So executives, design thinking, and formally trained designers.
And what do you tell people about that ratio of designers to other?
It's different. It's different for every company, for every domain, for every for every circumstance. At IBM, we have a 1 designer to 8 coding developers ratio. That's our target ratio.
1 to 8.
1 to 8. Even within IBM and our many different business lines, we'll have one business that's 1 to 4. We'll have another business that's 1 to 12. So it's we're having that conversation on an individual level, but it's an important conversation to have. And our CEO, the CEOs of those businesses, are very eager to have that conversation with us. It's a substantive and quantitative one that they can really relate to.
And what do you tell people about the time frame for the room? I mean, a CEO says, all right, I recognize I can't do this overnight. I want to make a design transformation.
Yeah.
Does it take months? Does it take years?
I think years. I think we hit a tipping point, starting from basically ground zero 6 years ago, probably about 3 years in. With our clients, given that we've learned a lot of lessons along the way, we can compress that, somewhat, but it's a good, solid 2-year, commitment for sure.
And it involves, workshops for the non-design people that are being...
Yeah, workshops is part of it. We've got a scaled digital learning platform now for our design thinking practice, which has been a great way for us to scale it across the company.
Questions? Anyone? Yeah, I see one back here. Can we get a mic?
Hello, Didier Boulet from Thales. One question is, how do you work with engineering and R&D? What are the terms of the collaboration with these guys?
Yeah, it's a requirement, and when we're talking about, that's why design thinking becomes so important in our context, because that's the framework that we're bringing all of our non-designer stakeholders into the conversation and into the process. It's a requirement for a business that is receiving designers, so bringing designers into their P&L at IBM, for their engineering team, for their executive team, and for their product management team to be fully trained in design thinking, or else they don't get the designer.
I see, is that Jean in the back there? Please.
Oops.
There you go.
I wonder if I could ask a question about the kind of larger system here. So one of the things that I see is I see a real shift in the young people who are coming to my MBA program. I sincerely believe large numbers of them understand the problems and want to be part of change. I think large business organizations, many of them do as well, but we're trapped in a financial system that continues to incent and value a particular way of behaving. And we know, I mean, how much can we expect people to fight that system? I just read an interesting statistic that as many young people aged 18 to 25 in the US believe socialism is as functional a system as capitalism. And I think that's the stage we're at, and I'm just wondering what your reaction to that is. How do all of us trying to do good work live within this larger system that seems to actively work against a lot of the work we're trying to do?
So yeah, a great question. So can design work within the capitalist system?
Yeah, well, I will just make, I don't want to play definitions, but I don't see that what we're in is in a capitalist system. I think we're in a corporatist system. And that what capitalism used to be called is what's now being brandished as socialism, which is sort of, there are more things than just money to be looking at and to worry about and to manage. But we have gotten so off the deep end where corporations can do no wrong and corporations are unfettered, et cetera, and we still call it capitalism. So there's a distinction there I think that's important. In general, we need entirely new tools. I know I've said that already. But you know, the old business adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. We need to be measuring new things. Now, maybe, I don't know, Doug, maybe you have an idea how to do this. Well, I don't know how you get companies to adopt those new tools.
Part of the way that IBM executives are measured now, and part of the change that we've implemented, is that part of their measurement, performance review, is on user sentiment. So that's an example of changing the incentives. Yeah. That's why that CEO of that IBM business shows up for the meeting with their design leader and me and my boss, Phil Gilbert, to talk about the value of design.
Right. That's the way to do it.
Is there a way to connect that, though, to some of these financial incentives that Jean's raising, so that it, reflects in the share price, which is what executives care most about, right?
Yeah, well, I think that I think boards have a tremendous amount of influence here of setting new goals and approving strategies and drilling down and asking their CEOs and C-level leaders to perform in these other ways, or at least to speak in these other ways, even if the accounting tools, even if the income statement and balance sheet don't yet show these things. We've been talking about triple bottom line and integrated bottom line, accounting for 12 or more years, but if a CEO today decided we're going to do triple bottom line accounting, there are no tools to turn to. The accounting tools are absolutely unresponsive to these things, and that makes it really difficult.
So we need more accountants here as part of this conversation.
right before machine automation gets rid of them all.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, gentlemen, it's been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you both for joining us. Please.
Thank you very much.